I asked Jaguar Wright why Beyonce never ages, and the answer still haunts me. The rumors had been floating around for ages. People whispered about it, but no one ever dared to speak it out loud. But I did. And now, I can't unhear what Jaguar told me. The truth isn't what you think. It's darker. It's far, far darker than I could have ever imagined. And I wish I never asked. But here I am, telling you what I wish I could forget. I wasn't anyone important. Just an average person trying to make a name for myself in a world I never quite belonged to. But I had my ways of getting close enough to get answers to questions that had been haunting me for years. And when Jaguar Wright, the artist I'd admired for so long, reached out to me, I figured it was a chance I couldn't pass up. Jaguar wasn't your typical celebrity. She didn't play the fame game the way others did. She was real, raw, and unapologetically herself. That's why I trusted her. That's why I believed that asking her about Beyoncé's agelessness wouldn't be a big deal. I thought it would be a casual conversation. Just another one of those questions that celebrities get asked all the time. How do you stay looking so young? But I was wrong. I didn't know it then, but that question was a door I should never have opened. This happened in 2019, during a small get-together Jaguar invited me to. It wasn't some huge public event. It wasn't a lavish party thrown by the glitterati. But there was something about the whole situation that felt off from the start. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could feel it in the air as soon as I stepped through the door. The house was beautiful, yes, stunning even, but it wasn't warm. It wasn't inviting. It felt like a stage, and we were all just actors in a play we didn't know the script to. The doorman, he's the first thing I remember clearly. He was tall, dressed sharply, but his eyes were completely blank. He didn't have pupils. It was like staring into an empty void. He smiled at me, but there was no warmth behind it, just a coldness I couldn't explain. I remember shaking it off at first, thinking it was just nerves. But I couldn't stop thinking about it as I walked past him, the unsettling feeling lingering in my chest. Jaguar was already inside when I arrived, and she greeted me with her usual calm, confident smile. But there was something different about her that night. She wasn't talking as much as she usually did, and she seemed more withdrawn, more aware of something I wasn't clued into. She had this strange look in her eyes, like she knew more than she was letting on. I had seen her at other events before, familiar events where the crowd was loud and buzzing with energy, where everyone was laughing and trying to one-up each other. But this was different. This was quieter, more subdued. The conversations were hushed, and the people didn't look like the usual partygoers you'd expect at a celebrity gathering. They were too composed, too watchful. I started to feel out of place, out of my depth, like I had wandered into something I wasn't meant to see. Jaguar gave me a quick look, her eyes narrowing slightly before she said, "Don't ask too many questions tonight. Just enjoy yourself." At first, I thought she was just being protective, like she always was, but there was something in her tone that made me uneasy. She wasn't just warning me out of kindness. She was warning me because she knew something I didn't. But I couldn't put it together. The atmosphere in the house seemed to shift with every passing minute. The usual party chatter wasn't there. The room was filled with a soft murmur of voices, but no one was really talking and no one was really engaged. It felt more like a waiting room than a party, a place where people were waiting for something. But for what? I moved through the house, trying to make myself comfortable, trying to fit in with people who seemed like they had all the answers. But there was a weight in the air that I couldn't shake. Every room I entered felt colder, more oppressive. I kept feeling like someone was watching me, waiting for me to say or do something. Jaguar led me to a back room where some of the guests were gathered. But when I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't like the rest of the house. This room felt isolated, almost forgotten. There were fewer people here, and the walls were lined with dark furniture, almost as if it had been pulled straight from a gothic horror movie. That's when I saw her, Beyonce. She was standing by the window, her back to the room, looking out over the city. She didn't move as I approached. It was like she was lost in thought. But there was something off about the way she stood, something unnatural about her stillness. She didn't turn around. She didn't acknowledge my presence. I felt like I was intruding, like she was untouchable. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. The question that had been gnawing at me for years had to be asked. I didn't know why, but I couldn't hold it back. "Why do you never age?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. The moment the words left my mouth, everything around me went still. I could feel the room pause. It was like the air thickened, and I was suddenly aware of every single person's eyes on me, watching me, waiting for the response. Jaguar's gaze turned sharp, like a warning was about to slip through her lips. But before she could say anything, Beyonce turned to face me. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker in them, something ancient, something unnatural. But it was gone in the blink of an eye. She didn't smile, she didn't laugh. She just looked at me, unblinking, for what felt like an eternity. And then, without saying a word, she turned away again. That was the moment I knew something was off. But I didn't realize how deep it ran. I didn't realize how far I had just crossed a line. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. The moment I stepped into Diddy's house, I was overwhelmed by the luxury. It wasn't just big, it was overwhelming. Massive vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers that seemed to shimmer with a life of their own, marble floors that echoed every step I took. Everywhere I looked, there was something expensive, something valuable, but it wasn't just the aesthetics, it was the atmosphere. The entire place felt like a stage, a place where everything had been meticulously arranged for the perfect image, where the truth was obscured, hidden behind polished surfaces and perfectly curated smiles. I had been to parties before. Hell, I'd been to a lot of them. But this wasn't like the others. The air was different. You could feel it the moment you walked in, the weight of it. It wasn't just the quiet luxury of the space. It was like the walls themselves were watching. The portraits lining the halls weren't just paintings. They followed you. The guests moved through the house with a practiced, deliberate ease, like they were all part of some unspoken choreography. Jaguar, as usual, seemed at ease. She moved through the crowd with a grace that made her look like she belonged here, like she was made for this world. She'd seen it all. She'd been in it long enough to know how to navigate it. But I felt out of place. I didn't belong here. I wasn't rich enough, connected enough, smooth enough to move in this world without drawing attention. But Jaguar's presence had a calming effect. She wasn't just a celebrity. She was part of this world, and I clung to that comfort like a lifeline. Jaguar looked at me and gave a reassuring smile. "Relax," she said. "Enjoy yourself. Just take it all in." I nodded, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The problem was, nothing felt casual here. It felt like everything was calculated. Every person, every conversation, every gesture. It was all deliberate. I noticed the way people moved in and out of conversations, never lingering too long, always just enough to make their mark, their presence felt, before moving on. It wasn't the usual party chatter. There was no warmth in the air, no real laughter. People were just existing here, like pieces in a game. I couldn't help but feel like I was part of that game, though I wasn't quite sure where I fit in. Jaguar led me further into the house, introducing me to people along the way, but no one seemed to care about me. They barely looked me in the eye, barely said anything more than a few words. But I didn't mind. I wasn't here for small talk. I wasn't here to make friends. I just wanted to watch, to learn, to see what went on in this world of wealth and fame that I had only ever heard about. I was already feeling disconnected, like I wasn't a part of the world I was standing in. But the more I walked through the house, the more the disconnect became something else, something deeper, something darker. As Jaguar and I walked through the crowd, I started noticing little things, small details that I couldn't quite ignore. The way people were dressed, not like they were at a fancy event, but more like they were in uniform. Everyone was wearing black, white, or muted tones. There were no wild patterns, no bold colors, just shadows and silhouettes blending into the background. It wasn't a dress code. It was something more calculated. Then there was the silence. Not complete silence, but a muffled one. You know that feeling when you're in a crowded room and everything around you is happening, but you can't quite hear the conversations? Like you're stuck behind glass, watching the world move, but not really a part of it? That's how it felt. People were talking, but their voices weren't clear. They weren't real. They were distant. I was trying to shake it off, trying to tell myself it was all in my head when Jaguar stopped at a group of people standing by a balcony. They were all talking in low voices, and when they saw Jaguar, they fell quiet. They looked at me as I approached, but there was no real interest. They looked through me. Their eyes weren't curious. They were just scanning like I was a passing shadow. I smiled awkwardly, but no one returned the gesture. They just nodded and turned back to their conversation, as if I was nothing more than a fleeting moment. Jaguar didn't seem to mind. She didn't even seem to notice the way everyone treated me. She was used to it, but I wasn't. I had never been around people who treated others so disposable. It was unsettling. Then, as I scanned the room again, something caught my eye. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough to make me stop. By the far corner of the room, behind a group of people I hadn't noticed before, was a door hidden away, barely noticeable. Almost like it didn't belong. The door was half open, just enough for a sliver of darkness to peek through. The air around it felt different, like the room was holding its breath. It wasn't just a door. It was wrong. I tried to shake it off. It wasn't my place to wander. It wasn't my world. I had come here to observe, not to snoop. But something about that door felt important, like it held a secret. Jaguar caught me looking. "Don't worry about that," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's not for you." Her words should have reassured me, but instead, they did the opposite. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way she said it. It was like she was warning me. No, telling me to stay away from that part of the house, like there was something I wasn't supposed to know. The air in the room had shifted again, a coolness I hadn't noticed before. The kind of cold you feel when something isn't right. It was subtle at first, but it was there, and it made my skin crawl. And as I tried to push the feeling aside, I couldn't. It lingered in my chest. It made me uncomfortable. Jaguar didn't seem fazed, but I noticed her eyes dart to the door for a split second before she turned back to the group. I couldn't help myself. I was already drawn to it. Something was calling me to it. From there onwards, things took a turn for worse. By the time Jaguar and I had made our way through the maze of guests, the room had only become more suffocating. The glitz of the party had faded, leaving behind something colder, more sinister. People moved through the space, their conversations muted, as if the party was happening in another dimension, a quiet blur that I couldn't quite touch. Everyone seemed detached, like they were going through the motions without ever being truly present. No one laughed. No one spoke with warmth. They just nodded, exchanged pleasantries, and moved on. At first, I thought it was just the high expectations of being in such a space, Diddy's mansion, the epitome of success and influence. But now, as I walked deeper into the house, my skin prickled. I couldn't escape the feeling that I didn't belong here. Jaguar, who had once seemed so grounded, was almost unrecognizable tonight. There was something about her manner, shifting, tense, watching, always scanning the room as if she were waiting for something or someone to appear. Her eyes were darting around, the familiar calmness replaced by a subtle anxiety that made me nervous. But every time I tried to ask her if something was wrong, she'd just give me a half smile, squeeze my arm, and whisper, "Don't worry, just take it all in. But don't ask too many questions." I didn't understand it. What questions? All I wanted was to enjoy the night, to soak in the high life and get a taste of a world I never had access to. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, the one that kept whispering that something wasn't right. It wasn't until I made my way over to the balcony that I started to feel a sense of unease seeping into my bones. The party was still in full swing inside, but out here, there was a strange quietness. The cold breeze tugged at my jacket as I looked out over the city. It was beautiful, too beautiful. The lights below seemed to stretch into eternity, and yet everything felt empty, like there was nothing beneath the surface. I was standing there, lost in my thoughts, when I saw a man standing across the balcony, watching me. At first, I thought he was just another guest, but there was something wrong about the way he was looking at me, something that made me freeze in place. His eyes were dark, almost empty. There was no expression on his face, just that cold, calculating stare that made my skin crawl. I had to force myself to look away, but the feeling of his gaze lingered like a weight pressing down on me. "Are you okay?" Jaguar's voice broke through my thoughts. She had appeared behind me, her tone softer than usual, almost concerned. I glanced at her, and for the first time that evening, I saw the tension in her eyes. It wasn't just the usual warning glance, this was different. This was fear. I nodded quickly, trying to dismiss the unease. "Yeah, I'm fine, just thinking." But as I turned back to face the man, he was gone. vanished into the crowd just like that. I shook my head, trying to clear the feeling of being watched. But the moment I turned back around, I noticed something strange. A door on the far side of the balcony that hadn't been there before. I'm certain it hadn't been there earlier, but now it was open just a crack, a thin sliver of darkness that beckoned. The rest of the house was bustling, full of life, but this door, this dark room, stood out like a wound in the fabric of the house. Jaguar noticed my gaze and instantly tensed. "Don't go over there," she said, her voice low, but there was no mistaking the urgency in her tone. "It's not for you." I blinked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's just a door." She stepped closer, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was watching. "There are things in this house you don't want to know. Things you can't know." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, a woman from the group nearby interrupted us. She was a tall, striking woman with dark hair and eyes that gleamed with a knowingness I couldn't place. "You shouldn't look at it," the woman said, her voice soft but laced with an unsettling finality. "Some things are meant to stay closed. That room, it doesn't belong to anyone. Not really." Jaguar shot her a look, then turned to me, her hand on my arm now, as if to steer me away. "Let's go back inside," she said quickly, but her words held more weight than I expected. Her grip tightened around my arm. "Now." I nodded, feeling a cold sweat form at the back of my neck. I wanted to say something, to ask what she meant, but I didn't. The look in her eyes, the way she gripped my arm, something told me this wasn't a conversation for here, for now. But something inside me couldn't let go of that door. There was something wrong with it. Something that pulled at me like a magnet. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. This was supposed to be a night to remember. A chance to live a life most people only dream about. But it felt more like I had walked into a nightmare. As we stepped back inside, the tension in the air only grew thicker. People continued talking, their voices low and flat. But no one seemed to be really there. Their eyes never met mine, and the few who did glance in my direction did so quickly, as if they were scanning me, not seeing me. The music had a strange undertone now, like it was saying something I couldn't hear. I could feel it in my chest, the heavy pulse of the bass, vibrating through my bones. But the melody? It was off. Like it wasn't made for human ears. Jaguar's hand was still on my arm as we moved deeper into the crowd. She didn't seem to notice the strange atmosphere, the way the party was losing its energy. But I did. The walls, once grand and beautiful, now seemed to press in around me, suffocating me, drowning out everything that didn't belong. I tried to shake it off. I tried to focus on the people around me, the conversation, the distractions. But the weight of what had happened, the locked door, the strange people, Jaguar's warning hung over me like a storm cloud. But that was just the beginning. I should have listened to Jaguar. I should have heeded her warnings. I could feel the weight of her words. But in that moment, my curiosity got the better of me. Something was tugging at me, pulling me toward that room. The one with the strange door. It felt like I wasn't just curious anymore. It was as though the house itself was drawing me in, its pulse becoming a part of my own. Jaguar didn't leave me alone for long. She stayed close, her presence like a tether I couldn't escape. but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. She was trying to keep me away from that room, but I wasn't sure why. It was just a door. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like there was something in there. Something I needed to see. Something I had to understand. We moved deeper into the house, but the unease in the air only grew stronger. The room felt darker, colder with each step. It was as if the party, this extravagant display of wealth and power, was falling away, replaced by something more sinister. The air wasn't just heavy now. It felt oppressive. The voices of the other guests sounded muffled, as if they were coming from a distance, and the music had faded into an eerie hum, almost like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. I tried to shake it off. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that it was all in my head. But the weight of the atmosphere, the quiet tension that surrounded everything, was real. I could feel it pressing in on me from all sides, tightening with each breath. The people around me weren't acting the same either. They weren't engaging in conversation the way they should. Instead, they were standing, watching. Their eyes followed me as I moved, like they were waiting for something to happen. Jaguar stopped, pulling me to the side. Her expression was tight, her eyes darting around the room. She looked over her shoulder, then whispered, "You need to leave. Now." I stared at her, confused. What's going on? What's really happening here, Jaguar? Her lips tightened into a thin line. I told you not to ask those questions. This isn't a game. You have no idea what you're getting into. I could feel the shift in her demeanor. This wasn't just the protective friend I knew. This was something else. She was scared, and I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just afraid of what might happen. She was terrified of what had already happened. "I don't understand," I said, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "What's behind that door?" She hesitated for a moment before replying, her voice barely audible. "Things. Things you shouldn't see. People you shouldn't know." Before I could ask her more, she turned, her eyes scanning the room one last time. "Don't ask me again," she whispered. "Not tonight. Just go. Go now." I tried to follow her, to press her for answers, but it was as if her body language had completely changed. She wasn't just pulling away from me physically. She was pulling away from me emotionally, mentally. I could feel the distance between us growing with every second, and it felt like I was being cast adrift in a sea of confusion and fear. She didn't want to be here. She didn't want me to be here. But I didn't understand why. Before I could say anything else, I heard a low sound from the far end of the room. A hum, a vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It wasn't the music. It wasn't any sound that belonged to this party. It was something deeper, more unsettling. It felt like it was coming from within the house itself, like the house had a heartbeat, and I was hearing it. Jaguar glanced up, her face pale. She started to move, almost too quickly, her eyes darting to the door at the far end of the hallway, the one that had caught my attentions earlier. My eyes followed hers, and I felt my heart skip a beat. The door was wide open now. The darkness inside it was thick, suffocating. It wasn't just a dark room. There was something alive inside it. I could feel it. Something was waiting. Before I could say anything, the door slammed shut with a force that made the floor tremble. A loud bang echoed through the house, reverberating in my chest. The party stopped. Everything stopped. No music, no chatter, no movement. Silence. A silence so profound it felt like the whole house had just taken a breath and held it. Jaguar froze. She looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. Her face drained of color. "Get out! Now!" she said, her voice frantic. I didn't understand. I couldn't. What was happening? What had just happened? I tried to speak, to ask her what was going on, but before I could open my mouth, I felt it, an overwhelming pressure in the air. It was like the very fabric of the house had shifted. The atmosphere warped, twisted, and the walls seemed to close in on us. I felt like I was suffocating, like the weight of the world was pressing down on my chest. The air turned thick, and the only sound I could hear was the pulse in my own head. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was a man, tall and thin, dressed in black. He stepped into the room, his movements slow and deliberate, like he was floating, not walking. His face was obscured by shadows, but his eyes, they glowed, not with light, but with something darker, something otherworldly. His gaze locked onto me, and I froze. Jaguar stepped in front of me, shielding me from the man's gaze. Her body was tense, but there was nothing she could do. She was powerless in this moment, just like I was. The man didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched. For a moment, the room felt like it was holding its breath. The guests who had been watching in silence didn't move, didn't speak. They didn't even seem real anymore. They were part of the silence, part of whatever was happening in this house. Then came the real shock. The man's gaze never left me, but I could hear his voice, not in my ears, but in my mind. "You've already seen too much. There's no turning back now." Jaguar didn't move, but I saw her eyes flicker with something like regret. She knew this was it. She knew there was no coming back from what I had just stepped into. The house wasn't just a house. It wasn't just a party. This place, it was alive, and I had just become a part of it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the weight of his words, by the overwhelming knowledge that whatever had been hidden in this house had just started to unfold, and there was no way out. The air in the room felt so thick it was like I was wading through it. Every breath came with resistance, like the atmosphere itself was trying to stop me from exhaling, from thinking. I had just seen the man, that shadowed figure, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity, and I couldn't shake it. I could still feel his gaze on me, burning through my mind like a brand. Every time I tried to move, every time I tried to take a step forward or away, it felt like I was being pulled back. Jaguar stood in front of me, her back stiff, her posture rigid. She wasn't speaking, just watching the man in black, whose presence had completely altered the vibe of the entire room. The others, those who had been silently watching the party, were still, as though frozen in time. No one made a sound. It was like we were all part of this moment, waiting for something we didn't understand. I couldn't even tell if the party was still happening. It felt like it had ceased to exist. The silence was suffocating, but there was more than just silence. There was a hum, low, deep in my chest, like a vibration that wasn't of this world. It wasn't just the air. It was in my bones. I could feel it running through me, vibrating through every fiber of my being. The hum was pulling at me, like it wanted to consume me. I wanted to scream, to ask someone what was going on. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I was trapped in this thick, suffocating silence. The only sound that filled the room was the quiet breathing of the people around me, their breath barely audible, like they were holding their own fear inside. And then it happened. The figure in the doorway, the man who had spoken to me with his eyes, stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Each step reverberated through the house, like a command, like the very floor beneath me was obeying him. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what happened next. As he walked closer, his gaze never left me. I could see his features more clearly now. His face was sharp, angular, too perfect. It was like he wasn't human, but a creation, something pieced together in a lab, designed to be uncomfortably close to humanity, but not quite right. His skin was pale, too pale, and his lips were too thin, stretched in a way that didn't look natural. He wasn't smiling. He didn't need to. The expression on his face was cold, emotionless, and yet there was something behind that mask, a knowing, like he knew everything about me without having to ask. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating, like every inch of the room was filled with his energy, his influence. Do you understand now? His voice was smooth, velvety, almost hypnotic. But it wasn't the tone that chilled me. It was the content of his words. I shook my head. Understand what? Who are you? Jaguar finally spoke, her voice trembling just slightly. He's not what you think. None of this is what you think. You've asked too many questions. And now, you're involved. She paused, her eyes flicking to the man, then back to me. There are consequences. There are always consequences when you look too closely. The figure stepped closer, his eyes still locked on mine. And for a moment, I saw something flash in them, something dark and hungry. And that's when I realized I wasn't just in some strange party. This wasn't just a fancy gathering. I had walked into something much darker, much more dangerous. The room seemed to shift. The temperature dropped. The air turned cold and still. My breath misted in front of me. The hum intensified, the vibration in my chest growing stronger, louder. The house was alive with it now, like the walls themselves were pulsing. I could feel the energy around me, swirling, churning. It felt like I was drowning in it. My head was spinning and I couldn't think straight. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but before I could form the words, the figure raised his hand. It was smooth, elongated, but there was power in it. The movement was slow, deliberate, but it felt unnatural. I didn't know why, but when he raised his hand, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. And then it happened. Jaguar gasped, and I turned to look at her. She was staring at the figure with wide, horrified eyes. She took a step back, almost stumbling. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not again." I didn't understand. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Jaguar's face was pale, the color drained from her cheeks. "You don't know what you've done," she said, her voice shaking. "You shouldn't have asked. You shouldn't have seen." Before I could say anything else, The man's hand moved in a slow, fluid motion. The air around us crackled like electricity. I felt it, sharp, biting, as if I was standing too close to a live wire. And then, the silence. The man didn't move, but his gaze was locked on me. His eyes seemed to pierce through my skin, through my bones, into my very soul. "Time doesn't work the same here," he said, his voice still that soft velvet tone. "For some, time moves forward. For others, it stands still. It bends. It waits." I didn't understand what he was saying. I was too scared to even try. Jaguar stepped forward, pulling me back, but the figure's presence was too powerful. It was like he had become part of the room, part of the walls, part of the very air. I felt the weight of his attention on me, and I felt smaller, like I didn't matter. The more I tried to resist, the more I felt pulled in. And then, the walls around us shifted. The entire house, once steady, once solid, seemed to warp. The air felt heavier, like gravity itself was changing. I could see it now. The shadows were moving. It wasn't just the lighting in the room, it was something else, something unnatural. The house was shifting, bending, alive. The floor beneath my feet felt unstable, like it was pulsing with every beat of my heart. And that's when everything changed. Everything was happening so fast, but in some strange way, it felt like time had stopped. My mind couldn't process what was going on, but my body was reacting before I could even think. I wasn't standing there trying to make sense of things. I was frozen. My legs wouldn't move. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't make my body respond. It was as if the world around me had come to a screeching halt, but everything inside me was on fire, consumed by the need to run, to escape. Jaguar's voice was distant, fading in and out as I tried to shake off the overwhelming sense of dread that had taken over my body. She kept saying something, but I couldn't hear it over the sound of my own heartbeat. The figure, the man in the doorway, was still there. His presence was suffocating. It was like a heavy weight pressing down on me, on all of us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to scream so badly, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if my voice had been stolen from me. Like I couldn't connect to the world anymore. Like the reality I once knew had fractured and disappeared into thin air. Jaguar finally grabbed my arm, pulling me back, yanking me toward the other side of the room. Her grip was tight, desperate, like she was trying to save me from something or someone. But I wasn't sure if there was any saving me at that point. I glanced back toward the man, still standing there in the corner of the room. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his gaze never wavered. He was looking right at me, and I could feel his eyes burning into me, carving into my soul. His eyes were hollow, yet they held everything. And somehow in those eyes, I saw something that I could never unsee. I didn't even know what it was. A threat? A warning? A promise? Whatever it was the kind of thing that made your insides twist with fear. The kind that burrows deep into your mind and plants itself there, like a seed waiting to grow. Jaguar pulled me faster now, almost dragging me through the crowd of guests, but it was like moving through mud. Every step felt like a struggle. The people in the room, they weren't reacting. They weren't moving. It was like they were all frozen in place, like the life had been sucked out of the house, out of the entire world. "Jaguar," I gasped, trying to get her attention, trying to make sense of what was happening. What is going on? What's happening here? Her face was pale, her eyes wide as though she had seen a ghost. She looked back at me, her expression haunted. For a brief moment, I saw the Jaguar I knew, the confident, strong, grounded woman I had always respected. But that look was quickly replaced by something else, something I'd never seen before. Pure, unadulterated fear. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. "You don't understand what you've unleashed. You need to get out of here. Now." I stopped. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't breathe. I felt the world spinning around me, everything becoming disjointed, fragmented. "Jaguar," I began, but before I could finish my sentence, the figure from the doorway spoke. "Leave," he said. His voice was low, almost a growl, and it felt like it was reverberating through my bones. "You've seen enough. But know this, you can't leave. Not now." Jaguar's grip tightened around my arm. She pulled me harder, almost dragging me toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't even flinch when the man spoke. It was like she knew. She knew there was nothing we could do now. Nothing could change what had already been set in motion. I could feel my heart racing, my chest tightening with fear. But I wasn't sure what I was more afraid of. The man, or the fact that Jaguar wasn't even trying to explain anymore. "Jaguar!" I gasped again, louder this time, but she didn't respond. She was too far gone. The fear in her eyes had locked her in a kind of trance, a state where nothing else mattered except getting out. But I wasn't sure how much time we had left. How much time we had before whatever was waiting for us here caught up with us. I felt the air growing colder. The hum, the one I had felt earlier in my chest, like the house itself was alive, was louder now. I could feel it pounding in my head, pushing me closer to panic, closer to the brink of losing it completely. Jaguar finally stopped at the door. She was breathing heavily, looking back over her shoulder as if she feared the man would follow us. Her lips were trembling, her eyes filled with terror. "You can't outrun this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever's happening here, it's already inside you. You've seen too much. There's no turning back." And then, as if to punctuate her words, I felt it. The weight of the house shift, like the walls themselves were pressing inward. It wasn't just the space around me getting tighter. It was the air, the reality itself, beginning to close in. Jaguar threw open the door and yanked me outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't feel free. I didn't feel safe. It was like stepping from one nightmare into another. I felt the weight of what I had seen. The man's eyes. The figure standing motionless in the corner of the room. Jaguar's fear. Dragging me down, suffocating me. We made it outside, but the strange feeling didn't leave. The hum, the vibration in my chest was still there. It was still with me, and I knew, deep down, that it would follow me. Whatever I had just witnessed, whatever was in that house, it was already a part of me. Jaguar didn't look back. She pulled me further from the house, and as we reached the end of the driveway, I saw the headlights of her car flicker on. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling. The horror of what we had just walked out of. The terror of knowing that I would never be the same again. That none of us would ever be the same again. I turned one last time to look at the house. And in that moment, I saw it. There was a figure standing in the window, a shadow, watching us, waiting. And I knew then that whatever was behind that door wasn't done with me yet. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I can't sleep without hearing it. The hum, the vibration deep inside my bones. The feeling that something is still watching, waiting. Every time I close my eyes, I see the man's eyes, glowing, burning into me. The door I shouldn't have opened, the question I shouldn't have asked, has cost me more than I ever thought possible. There's no escaping it. I've seen things I can never unsee. If I vanish after this, you'll know why. Something followed me that night. Something wrong. And it's not done yet. It's only just begun.